Welcome to the Move with Motus Podcast. My name is Dr. Christopher Ellis, and joining me is personal trainer John Williams. We are the owners of Motus Personal Training and Physiotherapy. Together, we will discuss any topic you can think of when it comes to training and rehab. From the carnivore diet to hip impingement, you can be sure that all your questions will be answered. Enjoy this week's episode. Okay, John, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited for these two podcasts on sleep.
Yes, I know you like your sleep.
I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
And people make fun of me all the time. And I'm always like, I'll leave work at a certain time, and I'll make sure I don't schedule clients at a certain time because I need to get my 8 hours. And they'll be like, look at me sideways like, you're young, you don't need your sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out, after reading your blog, after doing a whole bunch of research, they're so unbelievably wrong.
Yeah, now you can point them to this podcast.
Yep, and I'm definitely going to.
Well, it's crazy. So I went to undergrad back in 1995. Yes, I'm old. And I was a psych major. And what we had learned back then, it was like, sleep is not that important. Like, you don't die from lack of sleep. That's what we learned back then.
Yeah.
That couldn't be further from the truth.
Could not be.
Yeah. So with this podcast, we're going to talk about the science behind the sleep. And let me start off by saying I got this information from Matt Walker. He is like the sleep guru.
Mm-hmm.
You guys should check him out. His website is sleepdiplomat.com. He did a TED Talk. That's basically where I got most of this information from. I just felt like it was so important that I needed to basically highlight it and summarize it. So, my patients, I can point to this podcast for my patients and say, this is why you need to prioritize your sleep.
Yeah, and if you like the Joe Rogan podcast, he was also on the Joe Rogan podcast, I want to say like 3 or so years ago, and that was a really good episode as well. Very informative, and a lot of the stuff Chris just said he talks about in that podcast we're going to talk about today and try to really give you guys the rundown on why sleep is so important. So one of the things you said in the blog, I'm not sure if this also came from Matt, but you said we're the only animal on the planet that intentionally deprives ourselves of sleep.
Yeah. Why do we do that?
Why do we do that?
I don't know. It's like a stigma thing. Like, there's a perception that people who sleep a lot are lazy.
Yeah, sleep is for the weak.
Yeah, some people, there's like a bravado about it. Like, I pulled an all-nighter last night. And I don't know. It's something to do with productivity and capitalism or something. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, and you see it so often, obviously being a personal trainer, physical therapist, like we talk to our clients, and you just see them just come in miserable, tired, working all night, whatever the case might be. They got kids kept them up. Uh-huh. They just cannot get to bed, and they don't prioritize it at all.
That's the issue right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see it with my patients a lot. I make my patients track their sleep quality, and so quantity and quality, and pit that against their pain levels, because usually when their pain gets amplified, is a week of really crappy sleep.
Yeah,
it's like putting a magnifying glass on pain.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. So. And
now, what systems of the body does sleep deprivation affect? Would you say
all of them?
And I was expecting that to be your answer.
But we'll highlight some of them today. So the first one, this is kind of for the guys. If this doesn't scare you as a male, then I don't know what will. People that chronically get 4 to 5 hours of sleep, it dramatically decreases your testosterone. It'll age you by 10 years. Like, in other words, your testosterone levels will be like 10 years your senior if you're chronically undersleeping, which is just, that's scary.
Well, I actually have a client who's doing a testosterone booster, but chronically gets probably like 4 to 5 hours a night.
Well, there you go. Just tell them, just prioritize your sleep. Probably don't need to take that booster.
He'd probably be good.
Yeah, that's it. So that's a big one.
But it also affects women too, right?
Yeah. They have testosterone too, so it's going to change their levels, and that's going to help. If you have reduced testosterone, it's going to be hard to keep lean muscle mass, right, and hard to have high levels of energy. So your workouts are going to suffer.
Yep.
Yeah. So absolutely.
And also it has an effect on cortisol as well, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cortisol also increases cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and that ties into the cardiovascular system. And so that does a lot of damage to your heart, basically. And this is what's kind of crazy is, spring ahead, fall back. Every year we go through basically a giant study that in spring ahead, when we all lose an hour just about one night, the next day there's a 24% increase in heart attack.
And to be quite honest, that's not super surprising to me.
Yeah.
So it was Sunday, and we lost that hour. I woke up way later than I expected. I was like, wait, what's going on? I was like, oh, yeah, shoot, I lost the hour. Yeah. And then the next 2 to 3 nights, I had an impossible time just going to bed.
You like jet lagged yourself, basically.
Yeah, and I'm very disciplined about my sleep. We're going to talk about the next episode.
Yeah. So the inverse is true too. So in fall back, the next day, when everyone gains an hour's sleep, there's a 21% decrease in heart attack.
So what you're saying is we should just increase night by 1 hour somehow?
We should just all prioritize sleep, basically.
Yeah.
So another system that's affected is the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
So you have natural killer cells, which I always think of like the agents in the Matrix. They're like these badasses, right?
They sound like they're going to do something bad in the body, but they actually do something good.
Yeah, so they kill tumor cells.
Yeah.
So chronically sleeping poorly will decrease the activity of natural killer cells by 70%.
It's a huge number.
Yeah, it's so bad that the World Health Organization has listed nighttime shift work as a probable carcinogen.
That's insane.
Isn't it?
Well, I think the specific number you said was when you get just 1 night of 4 hours of sleep decreases those natural killer cells by 70%.
This is an acute, immediate thing. But
It
of
happens-
course, it's worse with chronicity. But yeah, it'll affect you that very next day.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so sleep is just connected to cancer directly.
Yeah,
Sleep deprivation, I should say.
yeah. In fact, it can affect your DNA and your genes. So the genes can be upregulated and downregulated, and poor sleep can actually upregulate the cells, or so the genes that create tumors. So
Yeah.
there's a direct relation.
That's crazy. And you just think, like, if you just spent a whole lifetime getting plenty of sleep, how much of cancer can we solve by just everybody sleeping 8 hours a night from when they're 6 years old and on?
Yeah, I feel like if we prioritize sleep, reduce sugar and vegetable oils from our diet, those three things, we would like almost eradicate cancer.
Yeah, hospitals, there would be like 1 hospital per state.
Right. That's the key.
And so you talk about sleep and memory too, especially when we talk about deep sleep and memory, right? When we get deep sleep, somehow it has an effect.
Yeah, so your memory, when you learn something new, it has to be consolidated for long-term memory, and that happens in the hippocampus. So you see with subjects that have poor sleep and they try to learn something new, and they do the MRA studies, there's no activity in the hippocampus. So it directly will affect like learning and memory. So like when you're a college student, you're doing that all-nighter, that's like the worst thing you could do.
I know, and that's one of the things I always told like my friends, like they would stay up. I'm like, you're doing the exact wrong thing. And our teachers would always tell us it. And then for some reason they would keep doing it. When I was in high school, I was very bad about my sleep. We'll talk about that in the next podcast. And I thought I just had a bad memory. I thought that was just part of one of the pieces of my existence. I was like, okay, my genetics just say I have bad memory. But I would sleep like 3 to 4 hours, maybe 5 hours a night.
Yep.
No, that was the cause. Because right now I have a pretty good memory.
Well, there you go. Another big thing too is sleep apnea, right? So that's a big problem. A lot of people have it. It goes like super undiagnosed. I lived with it for like basically my whole life. I've always been like a really bad snorer. And finally my wife is like, go get a sleep study, because she was like sleeping in the other room, which we call sleep divorce. So I got tested and was, for full blown sleep apnea. And I got a CPAP and dramatically changed my life, by the way. Way better energy, and solved some like heartburn issues too that was going on. That's a whole other topic. But so sleep apnea.
Are you still using the CPAP machine?
Religiously, yeah.
Mhm.
I actually hate not using it. When I travel, I bring it with me. And so I just, the level of energy I feel from using it is so worth it.
Now, a question for you: since we've been doing the carnivore diet, have you tried to not use it since you've been doing the carnivore diet and seeing if that has had a positive effect? Totally off topic.
I have not. There may have been a night or two I forgot to use it, quote unquote, forgot.
Yeah.
And I didn't really notice a difference. And my wife woke up in bed next to me, so I think that's a good sign. So I don't know if there is a relationship there. There might be.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's interesting. So anyways, sleep apnea is tied to a lot of nasty things. And one of the big ones is dementia and Alzheimer's. So we have a lymphatic system of the body. That's like our drainage system, right? But we also have something just like that in the brain. It's called the glymphatic system. It's kind of a combination of glymph cells and lymphatics, a glymphatic system. And you have to get into your deeper stages of sleep for that system to be active and basically flush out, what you used in your brain for the day. And there's a protein called B-amyloid protein. It's like a sticky protein. And that's what collects in people that have severe dementia and Alzheimer's. So if you are having sleep apnea, you're never getting to those deeper levels of sleep. You're never flushing out that protein. And that's what we think is the relationship between apnea and Alzheimer's.
I listened to this lecture recently about sleep, and one of the things he was saying was that deep sleep, those REM cycles, rapid eye movement sleep, happens between hours 6 and 8 typically for most people. And so all these people out here touting that they get 6 hours of sleep and that's plenty, they're actually missing the most important, most restorative pieces of their sleep, and that's in those last 2 hours. And it's unfortunate because it only really happens, most of those waves happen in the last 2 hours, and you get 1 or 2 waves in the first 6.
Yep.
So it's like you have to actually get all 8 to 9 hours if you're going to do it right.
It's not fair. So, yeah, when I had my sleep study, it turns out I was waking up every single minute. So my entire life.
Every single minute?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it was bad.
When did you get this sleep study done?
About 2 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you went that long?
Yep.
My goodness.
Yeah, I just thought, I just snore a lot.
Yeah.
And it's been my whole life, too. And there was a period I gained some weight, and it probably got worse.
Right.
And by the way, you don't have to be fat to have sleep apnea, right? A lot of, like, lifters with big, thick necks can get sleep apnea, too.
Gotcha.
And it could just be, maybe you have narrow nasal passages. There's a number of reasons why.
Now, isn't there a correlation between the two, obesity and sleep apnea?
Well, yeah, the thicker you get, the more compression it puts on the bronchioles.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So, well, that's basically the gist of why sleep is important and why you need to prioritize it.
Now, one of the things we should talk about is how much sleep should you get, because you had a list of the different ages that you can be in life, and then how much sleep you should get at each individual age.
Yeah, let me pull that up because I don't have it memorized. So, newborns, 14 to 17 hours. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and it just progressively gets lower and lower. Like preschoolers, 11 to 13 hours. Teenagers, 8.5 to 9. Oh, no, sorry, 14 to 17. That's right, because they go through a growth spurt. Younger adults, 7 to 9. Adults, ages 26 to 64, about 7 to 9 hours. And then older adults, 65 plus, 7 to 8 hours. So, I mean, 8 is usually the ballpark.
Yeah, and so there was a couple of myths this guy broke down when it comes to sleep in that lecture that I listened to. One of them was that old people need less sleep. It's actually not true. They just sleep differently. A lot of the times they'll sleep in just different chunks of time. Mm-hmm. They'll sleep at night for 4 or so hours, but then they'll take a 4-hour nap in the middle of the day. So it's still getting their full 8 hours, and those cycles are still coming in. They just do it at different times.
Yeah. And then one of the things that happens, too, is the quality and quantity of their sleep tends to decline. So, as we age, everything declines, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Like, did you know your thirst declines? The perception of being thirsty declines?
Really? But not your need for water.
Well, you still need water, but
Yeah.
usually you hear, like, if you're thirsty, it's too late, you're already dehydrated.
Right.
That threshold happens later for an older individual.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of things decline, unfortunately, and the quantity and quality, which are kind of tied in together, decline as we age.
Yeah.
So it needs to be prioritized even more.
Yeah, that's crazy. One of the things that I've actually has been a shift in my perception of sleep since listening to that lecture that I've mentioned a few times. I wish I knew the individual's name because I definitely give him a shout out, but it was a very good lecture. I wish I could point people to it. But one of the myths that he talked about with sleep was that you can never be overslept. So you could sleep 10 hours in the night and you wake up the next morning, if you're feeling a little groggy, you're not overslept. Chances are you still probably have not had enough sleep.
Yeah.
So one of the things he talked about was this concept of sleep debt. This was a pretty interesting thing. Again, very formative for my perception of sleep. And you can go into sleep debt. Let's say you have 5 nights in a row where you got 5 hours of sleep. So 5 times 3, 8 being the total hours that you need to sleep, you're at 15 hours of sleep debt. Now, what you need to do in order to become well rested is you need to pay off all of that sleep debt. So you need to sleep excess of hours, hopefully 10 hours a night, if not more, to be able to pay off that sleep debt over time. One of the things they did is they took Division I athletes through a 3-week trial of just getting them as much sleep as possible for 3 weeks, expecting it would pay off all of their sleep debt, and their performance increased dramatically, like tens of percentage points. And one of the other things when it comes to sleep debt is you can't have sleep credit. So you can only have sleep debt. So you can't have I have 5.
There's no rollover.
There's no rollover. And you can have up to 50 hours of sleep debt, but no more than that.
Interesting.
But granted, 50 hours of sleep debt, that's a lot to pay off. You got to think of how many extra hours of sleep you need a night, how many weeks that takes to pay off. It's going to be pretty tough.
That's so interesting because I learned just the opposite back in the 90s, right? This just shows like how much the science has changed.
Yep.
I learned that if you go 3 days without sleep and just sleep 8 hours the next day, you're fine.
No.
But it's looking like the science is saying just the opposite.
Yeah, you're going to have to sleep 11 hours that next night to pay off the hours of sleep that you lost.
Yeah. Get your sleep, everybody.
Get your sleep, everybody, for real. Did we miss anything? No, actually, I think in this podcast, before we do the Habits of Sleep podcast, even though it is kind of a Habits of Sleep podcast, because some people have bad habits when it comes to this stuff, we should talk about sleep pills, caffeine, and alcohol and their effect on sleep.
Absolutely. You want to do that in the next one, right?
I'm thinking doing it right now.
Okay. Well, basically, a lot of people sort of self-medicate and, they take, pills to try to sort of knock themselves out, or a glass of wine or something like that.
Smoke weed.
Yes. Yeah. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of like taking a baseball bat to yourself and it's like a blunt instrument to the head, so you're not going to get the same quality of sleep. So, and then people tend to get into that alcohol in the evening, caffeine in the morning routine. That turns out that like significantly disrupts the like sort of sleep cycle.
Yep.
So that's a big no-no.
Big no-no. And one of the things when it comes to alcohol as well, again, this coming back from that lecture that I listened to, 1 to 2 drinks is okay. Anything more than 2 drinks, based on the research, starts to be where you lose those deep cycles of sleep. But I would even say, especially from smaller people out there, 2 drinks is got to be too much.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a drink at night and you need to get sleep that night, I mean, you do need to get sleep that night, but if you think it's going to be tough to get as much sleep as possible, stay away from alcohol probably entirely, because you're just going to screw yourself up.
Yeah, and this ties into recovery and like heart rate variability, which is a whole nother podcast that I'm looking forward to doing. Mm-hmm. But we're finding that alcohol significantly inhibits your HRV, or it gives you a really bad recovery score.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And now caffeine, too, is also something we probably shouldn't be having close to bedtime.
Yeah, I think 6 hours, I believe, is the half-life. So, yeah, definitely no caffeine 6 hours prior to bed.
Yeah, you don't want to be wired trying to get to bed.
Yep.
And a lot of people have that afternoon cup of coffee, and they're like, oh, I couldn't get to sleep last night. I wonder why.
Yep.
It's not really much of a secret.
All right, so that's all I really have for you on sleep. Do you want to wrap this one up?
I think this was a good summation of all the things you need to be aware of with how important sleep is. And now we'll talk about how to get to sleep faster and get better sleep every single night.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Yep. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have any questions you want answered, find us on Instagram at Motus Naples or send us an email. You can fill out a contact form on our website, which is motusnaples.com. Make sure to check out our blog and our shop as well, where there are downloadable programs that we'll continue to update. This is the Move with Motus podcast. We'll see you next week.